Help get our country back on the right track. We've had a good week this week. I saw Jack earlier this week. We had a farm forum in the district. We invited different farmers and ranchers from around the 4th District to come and get together and talk about agriculture and the Farm Bill. As you know, that comes up every 5 years for authorization, and this year it's supposed to expire. So I'm on the House Agriculture Committee, and I'm really glad to have that opportunity because it's a personal interest of mine. I grew up on a farm, and my husband and I farm today, and Missouri's most important #1 industry, and it's certainly very important here in the 4th District. But I'm the only Missouri representative now on the Ag Committee, and so I not only represent our district, but actually have an opportunity to stand strong for the entire Missouri agriculture. So I feel very honored to do that. We had a great forum. We got a lot of good input on that. And if you all have any thoughts on the Farm Bill, I'd be happy to have your input on that. But I also feel very honored to serve you on the House Armed Services Committee. And my dad is in the U.S. Army Reserves, and I just have such a special place in my heart for the men and women in uniform and their families who are willing to go away from home and to put it all on the line to serve us, to keep us safe. And I tell you, there's a lot of threats in our world today. And I spend most of my time actually in Washington on Armed Services, various subcommittees. I'm on 3 subcommittees there, and we have a lot of hearings every week. There's so much happening, whether it's cybersecurity threat, whether it's Iran, keep an eye on them, whether it's what's going on in China. It's evolving every day. Something coming out of China, North Korea, and then of course with Iraq and Afghanistan, with the drawdown there. I did get to go to Afghanistan last May and led a congressional delegation. Got to visit with General Petraeus and get to see firsthand the good work that our men and women in uniform are doing, pushing back on Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and most importantly, taking the fight to them, defeating them, deterring them, and so we have now over 10 years in our country without another attack because of their bravery and their sacrifice. So there's a lot going on. I feel very honored to get to serve you. I see the veterans here today, and I'm so honored and privileged to get to meet you. So thank you guys for coming out. Raise your hand. I know I got to recognize some, but if you're a veteran, would you please raise your hand? Wow. Thank you. Still serving your country today by taking time to come and be involved and give your input. What I'd like to do today is just share briefly some of the highlights of a few things that we've been dealing with and talking about in Washington, D.C. And then, mainly, I want to open it up to you to hear your questions, your comments, your ideas, frankly, on what I need to do as I work for you when I go back on Monday to Washington. But before I do that, I want to recognize State Representative Sandy Crawford here. She is so well, and we got to know each other a couple years ago. I just feel very honored to get to work with her in serving you. She served you in Jefferson City, and I served you, but we quite often talk. We saw each other with the tornado that came through here. I'm so thankful that things are recovering and more people were hurt in that potentially even more devastating tornado. But certainly we grieve for the family that did lose their member. And I was glad that I took an early flight home so I could be here and see firsthand the devastation, and Sandy was there. I know Senator Parson is just doing a fabulous job as well. I feel so honored to get to work with him as well. He's doing a great job. Anyway, you have wonderful people here in the city government and county government, emergency management, Jason in emergency management. I point that way, and everybody's turning up. When I drove in, we went by the Dallas County Emergency Center, so that's why it was kind of. I don't know, maybe it was this room. But Jason and everybody did such a great job here, working hours without sleep, to get everything back going again. So I want to certainly commend all the great work that you all are doing here, and to see former Senator Morris Westfall here too. Glad to see you here, and appreciate all your good service that you've done for years for people in this area. But just to highlight a few things before we open up for questions, if I can remember how this works here, some of the hot topics. The federal spending spending, or truthfully overspending, is still number one concern that is on many of our minds here. This I showed you last year, but wanted to just remind everybody kind of where our money goes in the budget. And it's kind of revealing in that the Congress just votes every year pretty much on these two areas. Everything else is just kind of automatically in motion based on past legislation. And so it's more difficult to control the spending here. But this is a non-defense discretionary, what I would consider most of federal government, all your departments, the Department of Energy, Department of Education, Department of Transportation, on and on. They're there. Congress's budget is there. Foreign aid is here. So that's in this category. And then, of course, this is our defense. And then, like I said, everything here is just called your mandatory spending categories. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt, you have to pay that, just money goes out. The other mandatory is many other programs that are lumped together, where Congress has basically passed a bill years ago saying that as a citizen, if you meet so many parameters, you're entitled to X amount of dollars. And so that would be your Pell Grants, unemployment, welfare programs, farm subsidies. There's several different types of bills that would fit in that category. So they just put them all together for simplicity's sake, called other mandatory. But that's the some of the categories there. If you take those same categories, like I asked my staff to do, and put them in a bar graph and compare them to the money that comes in, I thought that might be helpful. So this is the same pie chart, just in the graph form. We have the same categories: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, other mandatory, national defense, other discretionary, interest on the debt. But this is how much money came in, and this is 2010 now, from these various areas. We all pay Social Security. I pay Social Security, you do. But do you see last year the difference? Which is bigger, the amount coming in and the amount going out? Yeah, and I just want to point out 2010 was a milestone in the history of our country. That's the first year that more money is now starting to go out of Social Security than is coming in. And that's anticipated to continue for years now because of the baby boomers joining the system. There's 10,000 of us baby boomers, and yes, I'm in the category of baby boomer. I'm on the younger end, just want to clarify. But anyway, there's 10,000 of us joining the system a day, and so that's more money is going out. Now, that's okay for several years because more money has been coming in the past. And so those extra revenues the Social Security trustees have invested in treasury bonds, treasury bills, and they have been getting interest on those. And they tell me there's actually a file cabinet somewhere in Washington, D.C. where you can go, hello, and they have the papers, the actual, what they call them, a CD or IOUs or whatever, that the Social Security has invested in. So what happened last year is Social Security trustees have started cashing those in and getting the money from the federal government to pay them back. And that's expected to work for a few more years, but there is going to have a point a few years down the road where all of the CDs or the IOUs or whatever you call them will be gone, and then we'll have to subsidize it totally from the federal government or make some changes. So that's why you're hearing the Social Security trustees and some others saying maybe we should tweak the system, make some changes now to make sure that down the road it still remains financially viable. But I did just want to let you know, if you know someone who's getting Social Security, not to be scared. Don't let any TV ads or whatever that you may hear say that Social Security, Washington's trying to take away Social Security. There's nothing like that. What we do is want to just make sure that it's preserved and it's there for the future. Medicare, you see there's a big difference here. Everybody pays Medicare tax, I do too, but it's not near matching the amount going out there. So this is the real problem. Social Security isn't quite as big of an issue as actually Medicare is. The average American couple pays in about $110,000 over their lifetime into Medicare, but right now the average American couple is receiving about $330,000 worth of benefits. So you can see that's a That's a problem in the budget. And so that's why there is some reforms being talked about to try to improve the system, provide the health care, the access to seniors, but at the same time giving them more control over their dollars, saving the government some money while doing it. So I'd be happy to answer your questions on some of those if you want to talk more about that. Here's the income tax. We've said April 15th. Wasn't that a fun day? But this is how much money we paid in 2010 as citizens. This is how much came in corporate tax rate, other, and excise tax. But you see, there's a real deficit there, and that's why we're in the problem we are. In 2010, that's how much money we had to borrow, just to keep all the programs going that are currently in place. And so, that leads us to over almost $16 trillion in debt. The thing that's so concerning about it, not only do we owe $16 trillion debt, we're borrowing about $4 billion a day to keep things going, but it's who owns our debt. Of our debt, about 29% of that $15 trillion, hello, glad you're here, is owed to foreign countries. And of the foreign countries, this is the pie chart that shows who are those countries that we owe money to. The majority is to China. And that is a real concern of mine. In fact, with the interest that we paid to China on our debt, China can afford to buy 3 new Joint Strike Fighters every week with $50 million left over. And I can tell you, on Armed Services Committee, they are using that money to build up their military, and it's concerning. So, if you didn't have any other reason, I think, to be for reducing our debt and deficit and getting us to a balanced budget, this kind of motivates me. Let's see, what else here? So the solution, I think, is a balanced budget, and we've tried that 2 ways in the House. We brought up a balanced budget amendment and voted on it at the federal level. Now, Sandy will tell you at the state level, and Morris, when I was there as a state rep, Missouri, in our Constitution, we have a balanced budget amendment, which is doesn't it, Sandy? I know she's dealing with it right now. They have to see how much revenues are coming in, and they cannot spend more than that. So it forces the elected officials to have to live within their means, make some tough choices. We don't have that at the federal level. And that's why I think you see all this spending. It's a lot easier to say, let's create a new program than to sometimes make those tough decisions. To pass a budget, a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, we needed 2/3 vote passage in the House and the Senate, and then it would have gone out to the state legislatures for ratification. And you may remember from your 8th grade social studies, but then we would need 3/4 of the states to ratify it to actually approve a new amendment. We came 5 votes short in the House of getting the 2/3 we needed. So that was kind of disappointing, but we're going to keep trying on that. And on the other front, we as the Republicans in the House, we decided we'll just do it ourselves. You don't need an amendment, just pass a balanced budget. So we passed a budget 2 years in a row that gets us to a balanced budget. A few years down the road, I've learned you couldn't do it overnight, or it would just totally devastate most of these programs. But at least move us down towards a balanced budget. I also voted this year on a more aggressive budget. It didn't pass, but one that would have had us balanced in 5 years. But I think it's just very much a priority what we got to do. If we don't, and this is the House budget that we voted on. It did get us to balance, but not till 2050. This is the president's budget. It never balances. It just goes through the roof. I just think that's unacceptable. This is the other version, more aggressive, conservative budget. I also support it, but it, like I said, didn't pass. But Paul Ryan and the other budget did incorporate some of our ideas into theirs, which I think were good. So we're going to keep fighting for a balanced budget. Jobs is another hot topic. Obviously, it's going to help balance our budget. We get more people back to work. There's two sides. There's cutting spending to balance the budget, but there's also raising revenue. And you can raise revenue 2 ways. You can increase taxes, or you can just get more people back to work. And that's the approach I support. Right now, we've got, 8%, 9% unemployment in this area. I think it's a little higher than some areas, and that's just very hard. There's a lot of people hurting, looking for work, and they want to work. And so they don't want to, but having to use government programs and things, which are costing over here. But if you get them back to work, they will be using those services, and they'll be paying taxes and supporting themselves. So we've been trying to do things to get people back to work. We passed a lot of legislation, and I can talk more about this if you want, but basically it removes the barriers to job creation that I hear as I talk to job creators. It's like, why aren't you hiring? Why aren't you expanding? And they tell me it's different regulations that government is coming down, the high taxes, the uncertainty of the health care bill, the uncertainty of their energy costs, and so they're holding on to their money. So we're trying to remove those barriers so they can feel confident investing, growing, hiring more people. I also did some practical things. We had a small business conference in Warrensburg, and over 300 job creators and entrepreneurs came, and we had different panels of discussion of experts on how to grow your job, how to grow your work, how to use social media to market your business. Lots of great topics on finance your business, and that was practical. And then we had a jobs fair over at Lebanon a month or 2 ago, and that was really fun. We had 29 companies from this area that came there that were hiring. So first of all, that was encouraging to me. We have that many people who are actually companies that are hiring if they find the right workers. And we had over 100 people who are job seekers looking for work come there that day, visit with the business owners, and we had some good reports the other day. It really made my heart good that some people actually got hired that day. So we're trying to do some real practical things too to help get people back to work. And the last big hot topic is gas prices, and I thought that was a funny slide. You know, we got gas prices, we got the arm, the leg, your firstborn. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. It's going through the roof. So what can we do to lower gas prices? prices have more than doubled in the last 4 years. And I don't think it can be that way. Missouri's average price, about $3.74. Now this slide's at Coleman sold, it might be a little less, but still, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money out there. So I've been supporting solutions such as the Keystone Pipeline, and trying to use more of the energy that we're blessed with here in America. I think we should make it our goal to be energy independent in America and set a date with 5 years or 10 years and go for it. We are the Saudi Arabia of the world in coal and natural gas. And if you look at the untapped oil reserves we have in this country, we have a huge potential. We could be energy sufficient. I also support nuclear. We need to get those permits going. It takes 10, 15 years to build a nuclear plant. France is almost totally powered through nuclear. So why do we keep holding it up? Let's get those going. Let's reduce some of the regulations on our power plants. Use the energy we're blessed with here. And so in the House, we passed at least 5 pieces of legislation to try to free up the regulations and get the president to get rid of his moratoriums and to let's start using our energy. Most of our ideas, to be frank, are just sitting in the Senate. And so I just want you to know that, the political reality, and I'm sure you understand that, but the House we have just been fighting very hard, and I have been, to try to do all these things. We passed these bills, we passed a balanced budget, we passed a budget 3 years now since the Senate has passed a budget. Harry Reid, the leader there, says we're not even going to pass it. And I have to tell you, it's been pretty frustrating. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. But I'm not deterred, and we're going to keep fighting and doing what I think needs to be done to help you and help create more jobs and lower our gas prices and get more people back to work. So anyway, I'll be quiet and hear what's on your mind. I'm looking for your ideas, your questions.
I went from state to state, but the Clean Air Act, the EPA, the Clean Air Act put me out of work. Would you talk a little bit about what may be done to curtail a little bit of this EPA, the business that they're doing? They need to be slowed down a little bit.
Yeah, EPA is out of control. First of all, I have to say we all here support clean air and clean water.
Yes.
I mean, very much. But what we don't want is regulations that are put on that aren't based on science, that don't make any sense, that are going to hurt our jobs and things. And the EPA continually oversteps its bounds, I believe, and the legislative authority it has to our own detriment. Such as now they're going to require carbon dioxide to be a hazardous gas or greenhouse gas. We breathe out carbon dioxide. In science class, we learned in school that plants, it's good for it. It's not harmful. And to require our power plants and our manufacturing plants to install this very expensive equipment when there's not even a health reason to do it, and put us at a competitive disadvantage to our competitors in China and India and other places just doesn't make sense at all. They came out last week with not last week, it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago now, time's flying, but very recently, the new regulation on new coal-powered power plants. Basically saying any new coal-powered plant has to be built with this carbon sequestration, capturing technology that isn't even ready for production yet. It's still in the experimental stage, and it's very, very expensive. And the intent, they even said, was to prevent any new coal-powered plants from being built. Well, what is 85% of Missouri's power based on? Coal. And we can do it. It's affordable, it's clean, it's accessible, So it's very frustrating. EPA, other examples, they're trying to regulate farm dust now. I've lived on a gravel road my whole life, and I probably always will. And I can tell you, you can't go down the road without making dust. You can't farm. We farm. You can't farm without making dust. And for them to lower their definition of what a coarse particulate matter is, such that it includes farm dust, and put farmers at risk of being sued from their neighbors or having very expensive fines imposed on them by the government just for doing their job, feeding the world, is wrong. So, in the House, what can we do? We have passed several pieces of legislation on various EPA rules, including the farm dust rule, including the boiler mac rule, including the utility mac, to say, EPA, you can't do this. Of course, it's sitting in the Senate, but we're trying. We also defunded EPA to a large degree. We cut money from their budget, and we've said you can't fund these onerous regulations. But once again, the Senate doesn't go along with it, and we've had trouble doing that. We've had hearings, multiple hearings in the House, various committees brought in EPA and tried to shed some light on what they're doing and push back on it. I know in Agriculture Committee, we had Lisa Jackson, Administrator of EPA, come before our committee, and the hearing lasted almost 6 hours because we had lots of questions for her and tried to encourage her to rescind these rules, to turn back from this agenda that she's on, and try to explain the impact that it's having here on rural America, on real lives with these regulations. They sit there in Washington, D.C., in their buildings, and they have no clue what their rules, what impact it has on us out here. So that's what we're trying, Paul. It is very frustrating. Yes?
All the rules and regulations, if the original bill didn't give so much power to the agencies to write the rules, which then become law, you cut a lot of time responding to individual problems, write the legislation, all of it, instead of giving the agency power.
Yeah, I think you're right. Of course, I'm new. I just got there, so I'm kind of stuck with the laws that are there. But I think you're right. They're interpreting it far beyond what's ever been done.
Those bills date back to the 70s. They tried to, I mean, everybody that's there, Dan's gone, but Congress started mandating. I was in the Missouri House at that time, and the federal government set down those laws on clean air and clean water with all that stuff in it back in it.
It is, you're right. Think back to the
Whatever.
70s. Well, a good example.
But back then it was needed.
Yeah.
I mean, the river right there in Baltimore was on fire.
Yeah. I remember when Lake Michigan was just a cesspool too, you know, so there's no doubt there's some problems, but I think Ellie's right, the interpretation is what's changed, such as something I had to deal with as a congressperson. I never thought I would have to, but what happened with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission at the Lake of the Ozarks. I don't know how much you followed that, but last summer I got a call from State Representative Diane Franklin, who represents Camden County area, and she said, you've got to stop us, you've got to help us. The FERC has required the removal of 1,200 homes here at the Lake of the Ozarks. And I was driving down the road and I initially thought, well, surely she's heard wrong, or let me look into this, maybe. It's true. Now this, the Federal Power Act has been on the books. It started in the 30s, but then they amended it in the 80s. And it did give FERC authority over more than just power generation at at lakes where there's a power plant, to oversee wildlife and recreation and things like that. So there you go, Ellie. I mean, it was in the statute. But no administration, President Bush, even President Carter, well, I guess Carter was really, President Bush, Clinton, they never used that legislation to go that far. This administration is. And so, as you know, I introduced legislation immediately saying, FERC, you cannot do that. I went to the House floor, made a 5-minute speech. We got the word out as much as we could. All of Missouri's congressional delegations signed on to my bill. It was a bipartisan effort. In the Senate, a bipartisan effort. Both senators co-sponsored the same bill, introduced it over there. Anyway, the good news is FERC backed off. And they said, okay, we're not going to require that anymore. But yet I'm still looking at legislation to go back to the original Power Act. Because to me, I know I'm just a farm girl from Archie with some common sense, but I'm like, why should the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission have any authority over lakes other than power generation? If you're the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I mean, it makes sense for them to oversee the turbines and the power production, make sure it's safe. But why should they care about a gazebo 90 miles away from the dam? You know. So anyway, we're going to be probably introducing that in the next month or two, more legislation to go back to the original legislation and to amend it. So we'll see what happens. But good point. Thank you. What else? Yeah, yeah.
I apologize. I don't hear well. You may have made some comments I did not catch. But looking at the charts, we are paying our debt with borrowed money. That's a Ponzi scheme. Thank you.
It's true, it's wrong. We gotta stop it, don't we? We gotta stop it. We can't do that at home. I mean, you and I know that. We can't run our households like that, or our farms, or our businesses. We're continuing to borrow money and pay our bills with. It's unsustainable. So we have to reverse course. We gotta turn it around. Yes?
Well, we've had a lot of dictators in the world over the many years, and they've all failed trying to take over this country. China has said they will destroy the United States. They don't care how long it takes. They said they would do it from within, which is what they're doing. They're influencing the whole country, including legislators and the power thinkers in this country. And they're just stirring up little fires all around the country, which makes us more dependent on them. While we're borrowing more, they're willing to loan us more money.
Yes, that's true. That's a good point, that's right.
So they got a bigger stronghold on us, or a stranglehold on that. I believe someday they will do it. So we can do something to solve it.
You are right on here. China is very much on my radar screen of a concern that I have. I've had concerns with it for a long time. When I was a state representative, I had a chance, I was asked to go on exchange trip. I actually got to go there for 2 weeks, and it's kind of chilling to meet with these Communist Party officials and to hear them say, we will be the world's most economic power in 5 years and you can't stop us. I mean, it's scary. Last week, we focused on cybersecurity in the House, and that's just one area that's very concerning. There are thousands of Chinese that every day go to work, and their job is to hack into our companies and to steal our intellectual property. They have the largest spy network in the world. I said, if you're going to make another James Bond 007 movie, they really ought to portray the Chinese as the spies. Because that's the reality. There's more Chinese spies. There's some here and then over there. The chairman of the Intelligence Committee shared on the floor some things. I went to 2 classified briefings last week. I can't tell you what was said there, but what he said on the House floor is enough to chill you, in that they have stolen enough secrets, trade secrets, from our companies that it would equal 50 times the Library of Congress if you were to print it all out, put it in volumes. They've stolen pharmaceutical secrets. They've stolen pesticide secrets. There's one company that was almost ready to go to production on a pesticide, had worked for years on the formula, had the patent, had the production ready to go, and China stole it and started making the same thing there, undercutting the price. And that company claims it cost them 20,000 jobs. You have our credit card companies. The chairman said on the floor that 500,000 times a day they're tried to be attacked into. So it's a real threat. They have the purposeful goal of undermining our economy, stealing our companies, our trade secrets, and out competing us by producing it at a smaller price or getting one leg up on us on negotiations.
Greater knowledge too.
Yeah, I'll just say that our side, our country is working very, very diligently, and we have a lot of intelligence on our side to stop them. But it's concerning. So that's just the espionage part, near alone the debt part, which is very real. We can't control that by getting back to a balanced budget, getting people back to work. And then we're not so beholden to them, and then we won't be putting ourselves at such risk.
Going back to your fighter plane slide,
Yeah.
GE gave them that technology freely. And they didn't pay their taxes.
Well,
GE moved a plant over there,
Yeah, they did.
So that in moving the plant over there, they had to give all the information on all the fighter plants, all the technology on building the turbines, the jets, and all the parts that went in it. That GE plants make here in the United States.
Happy to look into that, because I hadn't heard that specific, but I know I know other companies who go to China, say Coca-Cola or whatever. China does require them to help to share their.
But it wasn't only GE. It's not only GE.
Oh yeah, that's in other companies. When you go to China, that's part of the deal for being there. So it's a problem. So let's just get out of that and let's not be so beholden to it.
Let's
That's
just close up the loopholes.
Yeah.
Because that in essence is treason.
Well, I'm going to check into that because we have,
They said it publicly on TV. They admitted it.
because our defense is supposed to be made with American companies here and not put us at risk. The question that I've been raising in some of our subcommittees is some of the parts, the microchips, some of the subcontractors,
Made over there.
maybe,
They're
that
made
concerns
over
me.
there.
So I'm asking a lot of questions about that. I'm concerned. Yes.
What bothers me more than anything else today in the situation being what it is that an issue is decided before it is even put to vote in Congress, depending upon whether the Republicans want it or the Democrats want it. We can't get anything passed. It is so obvious to me that we are electing so many officials up there who put the party first. Fine. Except you put the party first and the ideas, etc. But it's impossible for them to vote solidly every time on every issue that affects their constituents right here in Hilltown. This is what I hope for the Republican Party for home rule. They don't support home rule, they don't support anything except whether they are a Democrat or whether they're a Republican. There's no issue gets passed.
Well, I just was share. You hear about a lot of the partisan bills, but there are several bipartisan ones that passed too. Including most all those energy bills that I showed you have bipartisan support. And I passed a bill last week from the House, sent it over to the Senate, which received large bipartisan support. Over 2/3 of the House voted for it. And I was really pleased about that. It was a bill to rein in part of the Dodd-Frank regulations that are hurting our small town banks, our credit unions, and our farm credit banks, and our rural electric cooperatives. They were falling into the same categories as some of the big banks on Wall Street, and we're going to have to be called a swap dealer and go through a clearinghouse and all this just to do some interest rate swaps, which are just in the origination of a loan. Anyway, we exempted them, made sure that the community banks and the others don't have to go through all of these unnecessary hoops. And it did pass 312 to 111, and we had over 60 Democrats. I have to go back and check on the number. But anyway, there are some things being passed. But your point is well taken as far as the system is broken. My experience has been from the Missouri House, like Sandy and Morse, and the way things I think should be done, and even according to the U.S. Constitution should be done, is the House passes a bill, and then the Senate passes their version, or the other way around. The Senate can pass their version, the House pass their version. But then it's supposed to go to conference. And then at conference, you work out a compromise or work out an agreement, and then it comes back to the House and the Senate for a final vote. And that's not what's happening there. Like I say, we pass all these bills in the House. The Senate has passed very, very few bills. And so I have been forced to, our leadership then has to go, and he negotiates with Harry Reid, and Harry says, I'm not going to take that, I'm not going to take that, I'm not going to take that. And rather than letting them vote and, the members discuss it. And so then the speaker will come back and say, well, this is the best deal we can get, and the deadline's here, and what do you want to do? So it's put us in a very awkward position as elected officials, and I don't like that. It needs to get back to working. The system needs to work. And I think the only way that's going to happen is change the leadership in the Senate and in the White House so they'll follow the Constitution and do the way pass a bill the way it's supposed to, where everybody gets to have input, all members. It shouldn't be just the leadership negotiating. So I understand. Yeah.
I believe Harry Reid would be a much better report to
how many senators would we need to how many conservative senators would we need to add to make Gary more?
I don't really follow. I think it's 4. Is it 4?
I'm saying
Like I said, I'm just focused more on the job. Yeah.
And is there anyone we would have control over that we could get back on our side to switch?
Now, Jack, this isn't a political meeting. I can't go there. Talk to Jack later. What's another topic you're interested in?
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yes. Why is there not a law passed that everybody has to read those bills before they pass through?
It makes sense, doesn't it?
I thought, well, we sending them up there, if they're not reading them, they just pass them.
Right.
What's in them?
I've been pleased. A lot of people, well, first of all, we changed the rules when the Republicans took over the House, and we said no more of these giant bills, the last minute, 2,700 pages worth of the health care bill. And we changed the rules that you can't vote on it until 3 days it's been out there. So not only the legislators have a time to read the bill, but the public does. And then we changed the rules that it has to go online, so all of America sees it, so there's more transparency, none of this backroom deal and shove it through idea that was dominated in the past. And that's helped to a large degree. And I have read almost every bill. There's been a few where we've asked staff to help. But anyway, it's a lot of people certainly do take it very seriously and try to read the bills.
And you read 2,700 pages in 3 days?
Yeah, no, well, that's why I say in the House, we're not doing that anymore. We're making sure they're not billed. But yeah, it would be very difficult to do that. So we did 2 things. You have 3 days before you vote on a bill, and then it has to be smaller. You can't have these gigantic bills.
Are you for the health care bill?
No, I'm going to repeal it. And we've tried to defund it, and we're putting forth solutions that I think will address accessibility and affordability, which there are some concerns with healthcare. But the solution that Affordable Care Act, the President's bill, is not the way to go. It's increasing costs already. It's increasing costs, and it's not going to make more people be able to get health insurance. They came out with some new figures showing how many people, even once it's implemented, that still won't have health care. It's almost the same. So it didn't address that problem either. So there's better solutions. Well, wait, I think she's next, and then we'll get you. Sorry.
I think my biggest concern is the assault on our freedoms. And could you discuss the Patriot Act and the NDAA?
Yes. She said she's concerned about assault on our freedoms, and I certainly feel that way about a lot of the legislation that's come down. We talk about the EPA, the control of what kind of light bulbs we use, but she's talking about the Patriot Act. I look at that very, very closely and want to ensure that everybody's rights and freedoms are protected in that. And I feel confident the final version that passed does that, making sure, though, it gives our law enforcement agencies the tools they need to go after the bad guys from the that are trying to do us harm. And so I felt confident that it was narrow enough that it would not infringe on innocent individual citizens here in America. The NDAA had a provision in it that there's been a lot of misinformation about going around, saying that it's going to, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember it. Yeah. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, thank you. Because there's a couple of other things, yes. That is not true. It actually has language in it that stipulates that no American citizen can be withheld in this way by the military. The provision, it says it in there twice, to clarify it. But I know there's been a lot of concerns about it, regardless of even having that language. So I have co-signed onto a bill by Representative Scott Ridgel, and it's going to be incorporated in this year's NDAA just to clarify even further that absolutely nobody's rights as American citizen are infringed upon by this provision. But we do need to have a way for like the underwear bomber and the other people who are from other countries that come here to be able to detain them. And it's appropriate for our military to detain somebody. If you have a guy from Yemen or Iraq who's come into our country and wants to blow us up, I think it's appropriate for them to be tried by the military in a military court. But we don't want American citizens to have their rights. So anyway, I am addressing that in this year's NDA. This week we will mark that up. Should pass out of committee. And then next week it'll go to the full house. So if you have concerns about it, hopefully that will be addressed.
So are you saying that the renewal of the Patriot Act took away the agents being able to write their own warrants, or was there, because that was a lot of concern over that was the assault on the Fourth Amendment where you're not securing persons. And for agents to be able just to write their own warrants, to have that authority, I mean, it was a pretty egregious offenses that they said they weren't going to use it against witnesses, but there's a lot of documented cases where they were writing their own warrants. And for me, and probably for maybe some other people here, I mean, I can't think of a government, even our own, that we want to give that kind of authority and power to. Because it can be abused in a flat second. And we never know who's going to be the next president, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or hopefully someone from the Constitution Party. But, you know, I mean, do we want Obama to have the authority to throw an American citizen in jail for maybe just a political whim? Or someone who may be seen outside the two majors, or whatever it is? I think not. I just think that as a representative, not only yourself, but the other representatives around the country, they need to be very aware of governments in history. Because if the governments in history had some of the powers that our government has now, I think they would have been infinitely worse. And I mean, we always have this idea that it can't happen here. But when you start to get the idea that it can't happen here, I mean, that's a good indication that it may someday happen here. Because nobody's paying attention. Somebody has to be watching. And so I think to address the Fourth Amendment, to address the NDAA would be definite attention. And the last one was the FAA, you know, whatever it was, Act, puts the drone 50 or 30,000 drones a year by 2020. When the federal government runs out of enemies to watch, eventually they're going to end up watching us because they got nothing else to do and they have a gigantic bureaucracy that's in charge of watching somebody. And so I think all those things need to be addressed from the point of the Constitution, from the Bill of Rights, not infringing on us, the American people. Because we're not the enemy. And I think that a lot of legislators are overlooking that.
Thank you. Point well taken. Make sure and get your name to us, and we'll get you the most recent information and the language and whatever else to keep you informed. But thank you. Good points. Excellent.
Along the same line, on March 16th, President Obama signed an executive order that, quote, made minor changes to 3 previous iterations of having control of all food, water production, everything in this country, everything, in case of national emergency, contingencies, or whatever. And I tried to research it. However, the last iteration that Obama signed on March 16th was written by lawyers. They don't speak English, and so it's very difficult to go through. But the essence was that the president has the authority in a proclaimed national emergency from whatever cause to take over practically everything in this country. Farms, water, all kinds of production. What I want to know is, how does Congress stop or alter executive orders that we want to say, whoa, no, we're not doing that thing?
Yeah. One is very difficult, and this president has done more executive orders than any other president, although has been a tool that's been used by every president since George Washington. But it's just supposed to execute the legislation. It's not supposed to meant to override legislation or write your own, and there's a lot of concerns with this administration and their reach. We can pass a law to undo that order, but that's very difficult to do right now. Private citizens can sue if they feel like it violates the Constitution, but that takes a long time. So it's really a difficult thing to deal with.
going back to the healthcare issue, thank you. If it is deemed unconstitutional, this is a two-parter for you. If it's deemed unconstitutional, how does Medicare get the $500 billion back? And two, would the president and the staff today turn around and trying to tamper with the Supreme Court and their decision? That's jury tampering, to use a legal term.
The $500 billion will be cuts that take place over the next 10 years, and they don't directly deal with benefits. They deal with different aspects, including cutting the reimbursement rates for doctors. And so those could be undone, would stop. I mean, those cuts wouldn't take place, and some of those other cuts just wouldn't take place. So that's not so much an issue, that they would be intact. As far as your second point was,
oh, the jury tampering.
Yeah.
That you're saying that if they deem it unconstitutional, that all payments, everything would stop, and Medicare and Social Security.
well, that's not true. I mean, there's the law that was passed, the Affordable Care Act, did not change the Basic Social Security Act. It did not change the Basic Medicare Act. That's just going to continue on. But what we're preparing in the House is our proposal to try to, an alternative, a way to improve the health care here in this country, reduce the costs, and increase accessibility. And so we are preparing a large package of that bill that we probably put forth the next month or two, and hope that it's supported by both the House and the Senate, and we can, get it through. Because there are common sense solutions, things that you can do, and one is to reduce the defensive medicine that's taking place by doing some tort reform, medical liability reform, allowing competition across state lines. You now have all these ads on TV, whether it's for Aflac or Progressive or whatever. You see those where there's property insurance, there's competition all across the country. Healthcare, you're pretty much bound to whoever's in your area. So let's allow it across state lines and get some competition so you can go online and they can compete for your healthcare business. Why not let you keep your own policy? If you work for a company and you leave, you can take that with you, have more control over your costs. If you had health savings accounts where you had the money and you could decide where to spend it, that would be good. More transparency among our doctors. So you know when you go in how much different procedures are going to cost, so that you can compare, so there's some competition. So if this doctor is going to charge this for an office visit, you go down the street, see this one, oh, he's going to charge $25 less. I think I'll go visit them. Right now, you have no idea how much healthcare procedures cost. There's no transparency. You have no control as a patient, and that's not good for healthcare. It's not good for pricing and controlling costs. So those are just a few of the ideas. There's ways to help people with pre-existing conditions by expanding your high-risk pools that every state or most states have, and working with them, working with people who have health conditions. So anyway, there are other solutions, and we're going to be advancing them in the House.
Congresswoman, we have time for just 2 more questions.
Okay, very good.
Back to executive orders.
Yes.
I thought the president only had the authority to make executive orders within the legislature, within the executive department. That's what it's called, executive order. When he gets out of the executive department, he don't have any law.
He's supposed to, the executive department executes the legislation. The legislature creates the law, the executive, they execute the law through the various departments, and the judicial branch judges the law. So they are supposed to stay within the law. And the problem is, what are you going to do if they don't? What reprimand is there other than the legislature pulling it back in and saying, no, you can't do that? Well, then you have to pass a law. It has to pass the House, it has to pass the Senate, and the president has to sign it. And he's the one that did the executive order contrary to that. So unless we use the judicial branch and sue the president, which take forever to get through the system, it's very difficult. So it's not a good system. One more. Is there a positive question? End on a high note here. Harry, you got a good one here?
I got a lot of them. But you say Social Security right now, we're paying out more than we're taking in because of the baby boomers. eventually we're gonna lose the Vicky Coopers. Are we gonna play catch-up then?
I haven't seen that's a cheery note to end I haven't seen the amortization all taken out that far, but I think in the meantime, before that happens, we're going to have to make some improvements and strengthen the system to keep it viable. But it's easy, pretty easy to do. Social Security trustees just need to do it. So. Oh, thank you for reminding me. I'll just hold it up the card. If you haven't signed up for our weekly email, I want to invite you to do that. I send out an email newsletter every week, letting you know what happened in Washington that week, getting your feedback. So please sign up for that. Also, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter if you do that sort of thing. And please keep this card somewhere, near your telephone or wherever, because it has all of our numbers for our offices. We have one in Lebanon, we have one in Sedalia, Harrisonville, and Jefferson City, plus the Washington, D.C. office. And if you hear something, read something in an email, or have a question, you go, is this right? Is this true? Or you have a suggestion. Hey, here's an idea I come up with how to rein in executive orders. Please let me know. Give us a call or email us, and we're here to work for you. This is Donna. She's our state director, and Shayla's one of my field reps, and I think Levi's the